Imagine the sheer volume of information that had to be contained within these human libraries. They were the legal code, the medical textbook, the astronomical chart, the religious scripture, and the historical archive, all rolled into one living, walking, talking druid. When a dispute arose, the druid didn't consult a written law book. They consulted their own perfectly calibrated memory, reciting the appropriate precedent or legal maxim. When illness struck, they didn't look up a remedy. They recalled the precise properties of herbs and the appropriate incantations. Their minds were encyclopedias, living databanks that served their communities. You are there, standing on the edge of a whispering forest, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient secrets. A heavy, almost sentient mist rolls in, clinging to the skeletal branches of mighty oaks, twisting around the moss-covered stones that dot the landscape. This isn't just any mist. It feels old, carrying the echoes of forgotten voices and untold rituals. You shiver, but it's not entirely from the chill. It's the prickle of awareness that you've stepped onto sacred ground, a place where the veil between worlds thins to a gossamer thread. This is the domain of the Druids, those enigmatic figures whose spiritual beliefs were so deeply intertwined with the very fabric of the land that they seemed to breathe with it. A common historical fact about this oral tradition is that it was a hallmark of many ancient Indo-European cultures. Not just the Celts, the Vedic traditions of India, the Homeric epics of ancient Greece, and even early Roman legal codes were initially transmitted orally. This suggests a deep, shared heritage of valuing the spoken word as the primary vehicle for cultural transmission. The Druids were part of a much larger, ancient intellectual lineage that predated the widespread use of writing for sacred texts. You try to imagine their world, a life lived without the incessant hum of electricity or the distracting glow of screens. Your modern mind struggles, used to the constant stream of information. Here, information came from the rustle of leaves, the flight of birds, the shifting patterns of the stars. The Druids were the interpreters of these cosmic whispers, the bridge between humanity and the powerful, often terrifying, forces of nature. They were not merely priests, they were the very soul of Celtic society, performing roles that would today be split among judges, teachers, healers, and even, some say, executioners. It's like they were the ultimate multitaskers, except instead of managing spreadsheets, they were managing entire spiritual ecosystems. You wonder if they ever felt overwhelmed, or if they just had a really good filing system for prophecies. However, the question arises, why did they resist writing even when literacy was known to them? The Celts did use writing, primarily the Greek and later Roman alphabets, for mundane purposes like trade, grave inscriptions, and military tallies. So it wasn't a matter of illiteracy in the broader sense. This leads back to the sacredness of the spoken word, but also perhaps a pragmatic concern about its potential misuse or misinterpretation if put into fixed, immutable text. If the wisdom was written, anyone could potentially get their hands on it, distort it, or use it for nefarious purposes. By keeping it oral, the Druids maintained control over its dissemination and interpretation, preserving its purity and their own authority. It's like only allowing certified geniuses to access the master code for reality. As you peer deeper into the encroaching fog, you sense their presence. They weren't just individuals, they were a collective consciousness, a spiritual network spread across the misty islands and dense forests of ancient Britain, Ireland, and Gaul. Their power wasn't derived from a single text or a rigid dogma, but from an intimate, almost primal connection to the natural world. They believed the divine permeated everything, every tree, every stone, every flowing river. This was not a god in the sky, distant and aloof, but a living, breathing spirituality that pulsed beneath your very feet. Imagine trying to explain Wi-Fi to someone from the Stone Age. Now imagine trying to explain the divine presence in a tree to someone who thinks their phone is magic. You'd probably get the same blank stare. A particularly fascinating and obscure detail about their oral tradition, largely inferred from later Irish myths and the structure of their poetic forms, is the use of mental palaces or memory techniques. Before the widespread use of written records, cultures developed incredibly sophisticated mnemonic devices. The Druids likely employed complex systems of visualization, association, and spatial memory. perhaps linking vast amounts of information to specific locations within sacred groves, or to the movements of celestial bodies. You might imagine a druid walking through a mental forest, each tree representing a different legal principle, each stone a historical event, retrieving information with startling speed and accuracy. It's like the original virtual reality experience, only the graphics were entirely in their heads. The deeper you delve into their spiritual world, the more you realize it was a world steeped in cycles, the ebb and flow of tides, the turning of seasons, the birth, death, and rebirth of all things. They didn't see death as an end, but as a transition, a natural part of the eternal cycle. This belief in reincarnation was a cornerstone of their philosophy. They taught that the soul, upon death, would simply migrate to another body, whether human or animal. You can almost hear a druid explaining this to a nervous warrior. Don't worry. Even if you fall in battle today, you might just come back as a really fluffy sheep tomorrow. Think of the peaceful grazing. It's a surprisingly comforting thought. Isn't it, though? If you were them, you'd probably be hoping for a swift return as a particularly majestic eagle. Not, a particularly chewy badger. Consider the role of music and song in this oral transmission. Many ancient oral traditions are deeply interwoven with musical forms, where melodies and rhythms serve as powerful mnemonic aids. While we have no direct musical scores from the ancient Druids, it's highly probable that their teachings, proverbs, and historical narratives were often chanted, sung, or recited to the accompaniment of instruments like the lyre or harp. This would have made the learning process more engaging, more memorable, and deeply immersive, transforming dry facts into living, vibrant performances. It was education meets ancient Spotify. Their understanding of the universe was profoundly animistic. Every element, every feature of the landscape possessed a spirit, a consciousness. The rivers were alive, the mountains had personalities, and the great oaks held ancient wisdom. When you walk through a grove of trees today, you might feel a sense of calm. The Druids felt a dialogue, a vibrant conversation with sentient beings. They would sit for hours, perhaps days, in these sacred groves, meditating, listening, seeking guidance from the spirits of the wood. You picture them, eyes closed, perhaps humming softly, totally oblivious to the mosquito that just landed on your cheek. Because, let's be real, even ancient mystics probably had to deal with bugs. The poetic form itself was a crucial mnemonic device. Celtic poetry, as evidenced in later traditions, was incredibly intricate, often employing alliteration, assonance, and complex metrical patterns. These structures, far from being mere artistic flourishes, served as containers for knowledge, making it easier to remember and recall precise information. Imagine trying to remember a long string of numbers, but instead, you remember a beautiful poem where each line holds a number in its cadence. It elevates memory from a chore to an art form. The spiritual power of the Druids stemmed from their mastery of this natural world. They were revered not just for their wisdom, but for their ability to interpret omens, foresee the future, and even manipulate the elements. They were seen as mediators between humanity and the gods, capable of influencing both human destiny and the bounty of the harvest. Think of them as the ancient world's version of weather forecasters, only instead of just predicting rain, they could also potentially make it rain or stop it, if you'd been particularly rude to a squirrel. This authority gave them immense social standing. Kings sought their counsel, warriors consulted them before battles, and common folk brought their disputes for their judgment. Historians still debate the precise content and organization of the Druidic curriculum, as well as the exact methods used to preserve such a vast body of knowledge without written texts. Our understanding is largely based on Roman observations, which were external and often biased. Archaeological finds which give us artifacts, not philosophies, and later medieval Irish and Welsh texts which were written down centuries after the peak of Druidism and influenced by Christianity. It's like trying to reconstruct a complex recipe based only on a few dinner party reviews and a half-eaten plate. You get the gist, but the details are hazy. Their initiation into the Druidic order was no small feat. It wasn't a quick online course or a weekend workshop. Aspiring Druids had to undergo a rigorous training period that could last up to 20 years. During this time, They committed vast amounts of knowledge to memory, including laws, histories, genealogies, and vast complex poetic compositions. There were no textbooks, no scrolls, no cheat sheets. Everything was learned orally, passed down from mentor to student. Imagine trying to cram for an exam when the entire syllabus is held in the living memory of your professors, and you're not allowed to write anything down. Your brain would probably melt. This commitment to oral tradition speaks volumes about their reverence for spoken word and memory. A stark contrast to our document everything culture. The Druids' role as judges and lawmakers relied entirely on their perfect recall of legal precedents. In a society without codified laws written on tablets or scrolls, justice was administered based on traditional law, handed down orally. The Druids' word, backed by their impeccable memory and divine authority, was the law. You can picture a tense tribal gathering, a dispute simmering, and then the arrival of the robed Druid, who, after listening intently, would recite the relevant legal principle, settle the argument, and pronounce judgment, all from the vast archives of their mind. It was a court case where the judge was the law library. This reliance on oral tradition also contributes to the maddening lack of direct written records from the Druids themselves. We primarily learn about them through the observations of their Roman conquerors, particularly Julius Caesar. And as you know, history written by the victors often has a certain bias. It's like asking your older sibling to describe a fight you had when you were kids. You're probably not getting the full, unbiased truth. Historians still debate whether the Roman accounts of Druidic practices, especially those involving human sacrifice, were entirely accurate or exaggerated for propaganda purposes. It's a valid question to ponder. Were they really as fearsome as the Romans painted them? Or were they simply a convenient excuse for conquest? Their knowledge of genealogy was also paramount, essential for tribal identity, land rights, and succession. Druids could trace the lineage of families and chiefs back many generations, a feat of memory that linked individuals to their ancestors and to the collective history of their people. This wasn't just idle chatter. It was the social glue that held their society together, ensuring everyone knew their place and their rights within the complex web of kinship. Their spiritual beliefs extended to the very architecture of their sacred spaces. While they worshipped primarily in natural groves, they also used magnificent stone circles, like Stonehenge and Avebury, as astronomical observatories and ceremonial sites. These colossal structures, aligned with the solstices and equinoxes, demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. You can picture them, standing within these ancient rings, the rising sun casting long shadows as they track the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. For them, the cosmos was a grand, unfolding narrative, and these stone structures were their storybooks, their calendars, their spiritual anchors. It's truly amazing. Isn't it, though, honestly? You still struggle to set your digital clock correctly half the time. So let's not feel too bad about not being able to build a cosmic calendar out of rocks. The transmission of prophecies and divinatory techniques was also oral. The Druids would interpret omens, commune with the otherworld, and receive visions. And these insights would then be passed on, learned by new generations. Not from written text, but from direct teaching and practical application. The nuanced art of reading bird flight, interpreting the movements of smoke, or understanding the signs in nature was something that could only be truly learned through apprenticeship and direct experience. It's like trying to learn how to ride a bike from a textbook. Some things just require hands-on, or, in this case, mind-on training. The Druids held particular reverence for certain trees, especially the oak and the mistletoe that grew upon it. The oak, with its immense size and longevity, symbolized strength, wisdom, and connection to the divine. Mistletoe, a parasitic plant that nonetheless thrived high in the branches, was considered sacred, believed to hold potent healing and magical properties. They would harvest mistletoe with golden sickles during specific phases of the moon, believing its power was at its peak. This ritualistic reverence for plant life highlights their deep ecological awareness, a spiritual conviction that all life was interconnected and sacred. It's a far cry from your current habit of, say, forgetting to water your houseplants until they look like crispy brown skeletons. Perhaps the Druids would have judged your green thumb or lack thereof. The emphasis on oral tradition fostered a unique intellectual culture. It encouraged deep listening, precise articulation, and critical thinking about concepts rather than just memorizing words on a page. It cultivated a different kind of intelligence, one highly attuned to subtle nuances of language and performance. Students weren't just absorbing information, they were becoming living vessels for their entire cultural heritage. Their spiritual power wasn't merely about personal enlightenment, it was about maintaining the cosmic balance. They believed that by performing the correct rituals, offering proper veneration to the gods and spirits, and upholding the laws of nature, they ensured the prosperity of their people and the harmony of the land. When things went wrong, a bad harvest, a losing battle, a widespread illness, it was often interpreted as a sign that the balance had been disturbed, or that the gods were displeased. And who better to intercede, to restore that balance, than the Druids? They were the ultimate troubleshooters for spiritual problems, the ones you called when your entire tribal operating system crashed. You might wonder about the potential for corruption or alteration in an oral tradition. Without fixed texts, couldn't stories and laws change over time? This is where the rigorous training and the communal nature of the tradition came into play. Knowledge was likely cross-referenced among various druids, and deviations would have been corrected. The very difficulty of the memorization process likely enforced accuracy, as any error would be immediately apparent to a highly trained peer. It was a decentralized, peer-reviewed system, but instead of digital files, it relied on thousands of interconnected brains. Their spirituality also embraced a pantheon of gods and goddesses, often associated with natural phenomena, tribal ancestors, and specific aspects of life. While many names and specific attributes are lost to us, we know they worshipped deities of the sun, moon, earth, and specific rivers or mountains. Their gods were not distant, ethereal beings, but immanent powers that could be interacted with, appeased, and even invoked. It wasn't about rigid dogma, but about direct, felt experience of the divine within the world around them. You imagine their deities were probably a lot more chill than some of the fire and brimstone types that came later. Just a guess. The loss of this vast oral library is one of the great tragedies of history. When the Romans suppressed the Druids, they didn't just kill individuals, they effectively destroyed a living cultural archive. The knowledge, so carefully preserved across generations, vanished with the last trained Druids, leaving us with fragmented accounts and tantalizing glimpses into a truly remarkable intellectual tradition. It's like someone accidentally deleted the entire Wikipedia for ancient Celtic society. Forever. As you step back, letting the mist swirl around you, you begin to grasp the sheer scope of their spiritual world. It was a complete system, a comprehensive worldview that encompassed every aspect of existence, from the smallest blade of grass to the vast expanse of the cosmos. The Druids were not just religious leaders, they were the guardians of this intricate spiritual tapestry, the keepers of ancient wisdom and the mediators of power. Their beliefs were raw, earthy, and deeply rooted in the land, a stark contrast to the more abstract and urbanized religions that would eventually supersede them. They held sway over the minds and hearts of the Celtic people, their authority unquestioned, their power both revered and, at times, feared. It was a spiritual reign that lasted for centuries, woven into the very fabric of the land they called home. As you reflect on this, you gain a newfound appreciation for your own ability to simply Google a fact or refer to a written book. The Druids operated in a different dimension of memory, a realm where knowledge was fluid, vibrant, and alive, passed on through the breath and voice of their teachers. It speaks volumes about their incredible mental faculties, their dedication, and the profound trust they placed in the human mind as the ultimate repository of truth. You can almost feel the echoes of their ancient voices, whispering across the centuries, carrying the weight of a world's wisdom, patiently waiting to be heard. It's a testament to the enduring power of words, even when they're never etched in stone. You're still standing there, the ancient mist swirling around your ankles, but now a clearer picture of the Druids begins to emerge. You felt their deep connection to the land, their animistic beliefs, their reverence for cycles. But who were these people? I really imagine them not just as robed figures whispering in groves, but as the very architects of Celtic society, holding a position so unique and multifaceted that it's almost impossible to compare them to any single group in your modern world. They were the glue, the nervous system, the central processing unit of the Celtic tribes. You've absorbed the ethereal wisdom of the Druids, delving into their intricate cosmology and marveling at the sheer mental fortitude required to uphold their sacred oral tradition. But now the whispers in the ancient groves grow louder, not with the rustle of leaves or the hum of insects, but with the ominous clang of metal. A new force is on the horizon, one that sees the druidic way of life not as a profound spiritual path, but as a dangerous obstacle to be crushed. You're about to witness the dramatic and brutal Roman confrontation, the clash between the spiritual guardians of the Celtic world and the relentless might of the Roman Empire. Get ready for some serious ancient world drama, complete with legions, battle cries, and probably very uncomfortable sandal mileage. They were, first and foremost, religious leaders. You see them presiding over ceremonies, leading prayers, and performing sacred rituals designed to appease the gods and ensure prosperity. But this wasn't like your Sunday service. This was an immersive, deeply physical spirituality that involved the entire community. Imagine a sermon where the pulpit is an ancient oak tree and the congregation is everyone from the mightiest warrior to the humblest farmer, all gathered under the vast, open sky, the air thick with incense and the murmur of ancient chants. They directed the spiritual life of the tribe, ensuring that the cosmic balance, so crucial to their worldview, remained undisturbed. When the harvest was poor or a battle was lost, it was often the Druids who interpreted the divine will and prescribed the necessary actions to set things right. Imagine the sense of foreboding that must have swept through the Celtic lands as news of the Roman legions spread. You're living your best life, communing with trees, memorizing epic poems, maybe sacrificing a cow or two purely for divine purposes, of course, and then suddenly, these guys in shiny armor show up, wanting to build straight roads and introduce taxes. It's like your peaceful, off-grid commune suddenly gets a visit from a very organized, very well-armed HOA. Beyond their religious duties, they were also the keepers of knowledge and oral tradition. This is where their true power lay, a power you, with your internet and libraries, can barely fathom. They memorized vast amounts of information, tribal laws, historical narratives, genealogical records, and intricate poetic verses. It was like they had an entire cloud server in their heads, but without the pesky risk of a Wi-Fi outage, their minds were living encyclopedias, passing down generations of accumulated wisdom without a single written word. Think about the commitment involved. A student today complains about memorizing 50 state capitals, but these folks were learning entire legal codes and epic poems by heart, over periods that could span 2 decades. If they had brain dumps back then, they probably involved a lot more actual brain and a lot less paper. The Romans saw the Druids as a significant threat, not just religiously, but politically and militarily. For the Celts, the Druids were judges, teachers, healers, and, crucially, unifying figures who transcended tribal boundaries. They were the intellectual and spiritual backbone of the resistance against Roman expansion. To subdue the Celtic tribes, Rome understood it first needed to neutralize the Druids. It wasn't just about conquering land, it was about conquering minds and spirits. You can almost hear the Roman strategists thinking, okay, first, let's get rid of the guys who tell everyone what to think and fight for. Then the rest will be easy. Their role as judges and legal arbiters was equally vital. In a society without formal courts or written legal codes, disputes, whether over land, property, or honor, were brought before the Druids. Their judgment was final, their authority unquestioned. Imagine a scene where 2 rival clan leaders stand before a Druid, detailing their grievances. The Druid, drawing upon centuries of unwritten law and precedents, delivers a verdict that both parties accept. This wasn't just about applying rules, it was about maintaining social cohesion and preventing blood feuds. Their wisdom and perceived impartiality made them the supreme arbitrators, ensuring a semblance of order in a world that could often be violent and chaotic. You almost wish you could bring your next parking ticket dispute to a Druid. You'd probably get a more profound and fair resolution than dealing with the DMV. One of the most prominent Roman figures to confront the Druids was, predictably, Julius Caesar. During his Gallic Wars 58 to 50 BCE, he encountered the Druids firsthand and provided some of the earliest, albeit highly biased, written accounts of their practices. Caesar, a pragmatic and shrewd general, recognized the Druids' immense influence. He wrote that they decide nearly all disputes, public and private, and if any crime has been committed, they determine and award punishments. This widespread authority made them a direct challenge to Roman legal and administrative control. His accounts often exaggerated the barbaric aspects, like the Wicker Man, to justify the harsh measures he took against them. It's a common historical fact that Caesar was not above a little propaganda when it suited his imperial ambitions. They were also teachers, educating the youth of the elite families. This wasn't just about spiritual instruction. It encompassed all aspects of learning that were deemed important for the Celtic nobility. Young men and women would spend years under their tutelage, learning history, poetry, astronomy, and perhaps even early forms of philosophy and medicine. It was an apprenticeship into the very essence of Celtic culture and leadership. They instilled not just facts, but a deep respect for tradition, nature, and the spiritual world. It was the ancient world's most exclusive boarding school, only with more mistletoe and fewer standardized tests. The Roman reasons for suppressing the Druids were multifaceted. Firstly, their spiritual authority often conflicted with Roman religious practices and the imperial cult, which centered around the worship of the Roman emperors as divine figures. The Druids were seen as competing spiritual leaders, drawing loyalty away from Rome. Secondly, their alleged practice of human sacrifice was condemned by Roman law, which had outlawed such acts. This provided a moral pretext for suppression, allowing Rome to present itself as bringing enlightened civilization to the barbaric Celts. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, their political influence and role in inspiring resistance were intolerable. The Druids were often at the forefront of anti-Roman movements, galvanizing the tribes against the invaders. Furthermore, the Druids served as healers and physicians. Their intimate knowledge of herbs, plants, and natural remedies was extensive. They understood the healing properties of the forest, recognizing which leaves could staunch bleeding, which roots could alleviate pain, and which berries were poisonous. Their approach to medicine was holistic, combining practical knowledge of the body with spiritual healing and ritual. They believed that illness was often a sign of spiritual imbalance or divine displeasure, so their remedies often involved both physical treatments and ceremonies to restore harmony. You can almost see them, foraging through the woods, identifying plants that look suspiciously like weeds but are, in fact, powerful remedies. They were the original pharmacists, only their inventory grew on trees. As the Roman conquest of Britain began in earnest under Emperor Claudius in 43 CE, the clash with Druidism escalated. Claudius explicitly outlawed Druidic practices throughout the empire, seeing them as a dangerous and subversive force. This wasn't just a polite request. It was an imperial decree backed by the full might of the legions. You can imagine the chilling message this sent conform, or face the consequences. It's like Rome was saying, "Your ancient beliefs are quaint, but our gladiators are very real." An often overlooked aspect of their societal role was their position as diplomats and advisors. Because of their respected status and their freedom from direct tribal allegiance, they served the entire Celtic community. Not just one chieftain. They could act as neutral parties in negotiations between warring tribes. They advised kings and chieftains, not just on spiritual matters, but on political and strategic decisions. Their foresight, derived from omens and divination, was highly valued in military planning. It was like having a secret weapon, a wise, respected, and slightly mystical consultant who could tell you if that upcoming battle was going to be a win, or if you should maybe just stay home and reorganize your rock collection. A particularly infamous incident that highlights this confrontation is the Roman assault on the island of Mona, modern-day Anglesey, in 60 or 61 CE. This island, off the coast of North Wales, was considered a major Druidic stronghold, a sanctuary where Druids trained and Celtic refugees often fled. The Roman governor, like Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, led his legions in a full-scale invasion of the island, determined to crush the heart of Druidic resistance. The Druids also played a significant role in Celtic art and poetry. Much of the oral tradition they preserved was in the form of elaborate poetry and epic narratives. They were the bards, the storytellers, the creators of the myths that shaped Celtic identity. Their language was rich with metaphors, symbols, and intricate structures, reflecting a deep appreciation for the power of words. They could recite lengthy sagas of heroes, gods, and ancient battles, keeping the cultural memory alive in a pre-literate society. It's a testament to their skill that these stories, passed down through generations, eventually found their way into written form centuries later. Even if in altered versions, imagine trying to keep a 500-page novel entirely in your head without losing a single plot point. That was their Tuesday. Imagine the scene as the Roman troops landed. They were met on the shore by a terrifying spectacle. The Roman historian Tacitus describes it vividly. On the shore stood the opposing army, a dense host, armed men and women, with hair disheveled like furies, carrying torches. All around stood Druids, lifting their hands to heaven and uttering dreadful imprecations. The Roman soldiers, accustomed to direct combat, were reportedly unnerved by this otherworldly display, by the wild cries and the curses of the Druids. It's not every day you face down a force that's trying to spiritually unalive you before you even draw your sword. A more chilling, yet historically significant, role attributed to them by Roman sources was their involvement in human sacrifice. This is one of the most controversial aspects of Druidic beliefs, and a point of significant academic debate. While Roman writers like Julius Caesar described grisly rituals, including burning victims in large wicker men, modern archaeologists have found some evidence, such as the bog bodies of Lindo Man, that could be interpreted as sacrificial. However, historians still debate whether these accounts were exaggerated by the Romans to justify their conquest of Gaul and Britain by portraying the Celts as barbaric, thus making their subjugation seem righteous. It's a classic case of history as written by the victors, where the narrative serves political ends. You can't help but wonder if Caesar's memoir had a parental advisory sticker on it, given some of the sensational details. But Roman discipline and superior weaponry prevail. Paulinus ordered his men forward, urging them to disregard the fanatical rites and savage superstitions. The Romans cut down the defenders, extinguished their sacred fires, and, most devastatingly for the Druids, cut down their sacred groves. This act of desecration was not merely military, it was a profound blow to the very core of Druidic spiritual belief. The groves were their temples, their libraries, their places of power. To destroy them was to attack their faith itself, a spiritual act of war. You can practically hear the ancient trees groaning as they fell, their spirits perhaps crying out in anguish. Their immunity from military service and taxation further cemented their powerful position. This meant they were a distinct, privileged class, free to dedicate themselves entirely to their spiritual, intellectual, and social duties. This freedom allowed them to travel between tribes, maintaining a pan-Celtic network of knowledge and influence. It's like they had a special, ancient VIP pass that got them out of all the unpleasant chores, leaving them free to focus on their grand, mysterious work. This widespread suppression led to the decline of overt Druidism in the conquered territories. While their beliefs didn't vanish overnight, the formal structure of the Druidic priesthood, with its schools and authority, was largely dismantled. Without their sacred groves and centers of learning, and with their leaders systematically targeted, the Druids found it increasingly difficult to practice and transmit their knowledge openly. It's like trying to run a major university after your campus has been burned to the ground, and all your professors have gone into hiding. Tough gig. Their influence permeated every aspect of daily life. Before any significant undertaking, from planting crops to building a new home, the Druids would be consulted. They would interpret omens, bless the endeavors, and ensure that the actions were in harmony with the natural and spiritual worlds. This constant integration of spirituality into the mundane meant that there was no real separation between the sacred and the secular. Every action had a spiritual dimension. Every decision was filtered through their profound worldview. It wasn't just a religion, it was the operating system for existence itself. However, the Druidic spirit wasn't entirely extinguished. In many cases, it went underground, adapting and blending with indigenous Roman and later Christian traditions. Historians still debate the extent to which Druidic beliefs truly died out versus simply transforming and surviving in new forms. Did they disappear, or did they merely put on a different costume? Some scholars argue that elements of Celtic spirituality persisted within folk traditions, local customs, and even influenced early Irish Christianity. For example, the reverence for sacred wells and trees, common in Celtic lands, continued long after the Roman conquest and the arrival of Christianity. The Druids were the intellectual and spiritual elite of Celtic society, a class unto themselves. They formed a distinct order, almost a separate caste, transcending tribal loyalties. This pan-Celtic identity meant that a Druid from Ireland would be recognized and respected in Gaul, a true testament to the uniformity of their training and the universal reverence they commanded. They were the glue that bound diverse Celtic communities together, sharing a common language of spiritual understanding and ancient wisdom. It was like a secret society, but instead of secret handshakes, they had secret knowledge. A common historical fact is that the Roman presence brought significant changes to Celtic society. They introduced their administrative systems, built extensive road networks, which, let's be honest, were pretty good for getting around, even if they were for military control, established towns, and spread their language and culture. This process of Romanization gradually eroded distinct Celtic customs, including their indigenous religious practices. It was a cultural steamroller, slowly but surely flattening diverse traditions into a more uniform imperial mold. You reflect on the contrast between their ancient world and yours. In your time, knowledge is fragmented, specialized. You have doctors, lawyers, teachers, religious leaders, and philosophers, all in separate boxes. The Druids embodied all of these roles, their wisdom interconnected, their influence holistic. It makes you wonder if something essential was lost when humanity started categorizing everything into neat little silos. Perhaps their comprehensive approach to life, where the spiritual, legal, and educational were all interwoven, offered a depth of understanding that your modern, compartmentalized world sometimes lacks. It's certainly food for thought, isn't it? As you ponder your own hyper-specialized existence, you might be an expert in, say, crafting the perfect avocado toast. But could you also judge a land dispute and predict the next solar eclipse? Probably not. An obscure detail often overlooked is that while Rome suppressed Druidism, it was not always a direct, consistent policy. Sometimes, local Roman commanders might have tolerated or even found ways to co-opt local religious leaders. If they didn't pose a direct threat, the suppression varied in intensity depending on the region and the level of local resistance. It wasn't a universal, scorched earth policy applied equally everywhere, but a more nuanced, though ultimately devastating, campaign. It's like some Roman governors were stricter about the dress code than others. Their daily life, though largely unrecorded by themselves, was undoubtedly rigorous. The long years of training suggest a disciplined existence, focused on mental and spiritual cultivation. Imagine their days filled with meditation in sacred groves, the study of the stars, the preparation of herbal remedies, and the careful articulation of ancient laws. They likely spent countless hours in deep contemplation, seeking answers not in books, but in the patterns of nature and the whispers of the unseen world. Their connection to the earth was not just ceremonial, it was practical, forming the very foundation of their daily existence. They were perhaps the original digital nomads, but instead of laptops, they carried mental libraries, and their office was a misty forest. So as you step further into this ancient landscape, you begin to appreciate the immense and diverse power wielded by these figures. They were the guardians of Celtic identity, ensuring the continuity of their traditions, their laws, and their spiritual beliefs. Their very existence ensured that the Celtic way of life, in all its complexity, continued to flourish for centuries. They were the quiet, powerful force behind the scenes, shaping the destiny of nations with a whispered prophecy or a carefully judged decree. The Roman concept of religio religion was vastly different from the Druidic one. For Romans, religion was often a civic duty, a matter of public ritual and state control, deeply intertwined with politics. They were often tolerant of other gods, as long as they didn't challenge Roman authority or disturb the Pax Romana. Roman peace, the Druids, with their secretive rites, powerful influence and perceived barbaric practices fell outside this acceptable framework. They represented an indigenous authority that Rome could not absorb or control, and therefore it had to be destroyed. The mist thickens around you, but now you feel less of a chill and more of an almost magnetic pull towards the heart of the ancient groves. You've glimpsed the Druids' multifaceted roles, their profound connection to the natural world. Now it's time to truly step into their most sacred spaces, to witness or at least imagine the very core of their spiritual practice, the rituals performed within the hallowed circles, and the deep, silent embrace of the ancient forests. As Roman rule solidified, the visible signs of Druidism faded. The grand public ceremonies became rare or ceased altogether. The 20-year training was impossible to sustain under constant persecution. The very social fabric that supported the Druids was being systematically dismantled. The Iron Age Celtic world, which had nurtured Druidism for centuries, was slowly but surely transforming into Roman provinces, complete with Roman temples, Roman gods, and Roman laws. You push through a curtain of dewy ferns, the air suddenly still and heavy, charged with an invisible energy. Before you, partially obscured by the shifting fog, stands a circle of towering, ancient stones. This isn't just a collection of rocks, it's a living altar, a cosmic clock, a place where the earthly and the divine converged. The ground beneath your feet feels different here, perhaps compacted by centuries of ceremonial footfalls, perhaps just imbued with the echoes of countless prayers. This is where the magic happened, where the Druids connected with their gods, performed divinations, and celebrated the turning of the seasons. It's like their version of a multi-purpose community center, only with way more mystical vibes and significantly fewer potlucks. You might wonder about the individual Druids who survived. Did they convert? Did they go into hiding, continuing their practices in secret? Did they become wandering hermits, keeping the flame of wisdom alive in isolated pockets? We have very little direct evidence of their individual fates, which adds to the tragic silence surrounding their final years. It's like their spiritual GPS simply stopped transmitting. The very choice of these locations speaks volumes about their beliefs. They didn't build elaborate temples or gilded shrines. Their cathedrals were the sky, their altars were the earth, and their pillars were the ancient trees and standing stones. You notice the way the light, even filtered through the mist, seems to play differently within the circle, highlighting the textured surfaces of the stones, some etched with unreadable symbols. These sites, often aligned with astronomical events like the solstices and equinoxes, were precise calendars, allowing the Druids to pinpoint the most auspicious times for their rites. Imagine trying to explain to them that you primarily use your phone to tell time. They'd probably just shake their heads, point to the sky, and say, "Amateur." The legacy of this confrontation is profound. While Roman power ultimately prevailed, the fierce resistance of the Celts, often fueled by Druidic inspiration, left an indelible mark. The stories of Druids, even those filtered through Roman prejudice, contributed to the mystique and enduring fascination with their order. The image of the Druid as a wise, nature-loving priest, but also a formidable and defiant opponent, was forged in the crucible of this ancient conflict. Their rituals were deeply tied to the natural rhythms of the year, and particularly the four major Celtic festivals, Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lughnasadh. Samhain, celebrated around November 1st, marked the end of the harvest and the Celtic New Year. It was a time when the veil between the living and the dead was believed to be thinnest, allowing spirits to cross over. You can almost feel the chill of that night, the flickering bonfires, the offerings left for the ancestors, and the hushed whispers of the Druids guiding their people through a night fraught with both fear and reverence. It was a time for divination, for remembering the dead, and for preparing for the long, dark winter ahead. It's like a combination of Halloween, New Year's Eve, and Thanksgiving, all rolled into one, but with a much higher chance of encountering a grumpy ghost. As you step back from this dramatic historical confrontation, you realize the immense power of an invading empire, but also the resilient spirit of a people determined to preserve their identity and beliefs. The Roman legions may have physically conquered the lands, but they could not entirely erase the spiritual imprint of the Druids. The echoes of their chants, the shadows of their sacred groves, and the memory of their unyielding resistance continued to resonate through the centuries, a testament to a world that was lost but never entirely forgotten. Imbolc. Celebrated around February 1st, marked the coming of spring, the lambing season, and the awakening of the land. It was a festival of purification, fertility, and renewal, dedicated to the goddess Brigid. You can almost smell the smoke from the purification fires, see the young shoots pushing through the thawing earth, and hear the hopeful chants for bountiful harvests. Beltane, celebrated around May 1st, was a joyous festival marking the return of summer, the fertility of cattle, and the blooming of life. Picture bonfires crackling on hilltops, young couples leaping through flames for good luck, and the entire community celebrating the vibrancy of the earth. Lughnasadh, around August 1st, was the harvest festival, a time to give thanks for the season's bounty and to prepare for the gathering of crops. You can almost hear the rustle of wheat, the laughter of the harvesters, and the grateful prayers offered by the Druids. Each festival was a profound spiritual anchor, guiding the Celtic year and ensuring the people remained in harmony with the cycles of nature. You've journeyed through the ancient mists, witnessed the Druids' deep connection to the cosmos, and stood on the battlements as Roman legions crushed their overt power. Now, as the centuries have rolled by, and the Roman Empire itself has crumbled into dust, the Druids have re-emerged in a different form, a potent mix of myth and modern reality. You're about to navigate the labyrinth of historical fact, romanticized legend, and outright fabrication that has shaped our understanding of these enigmatic figures in the ages since their supposed demise. It's like trying to untangle a very old, very dramatic conspiracy theory, but with more cloaks and less alien involvement, probably. The Druids were the orchestrators of these grand events. They would lead processions, chant sacred verses, and offer sacrifices, often of animals, sometimes of valuable artifacts, and, controversially, as Roman accounts suggest, sometimes human. The purpose of these offerings was to appease the gods, to secure their favor, and to maintain the cosmic balance. Imagine the sheer theatricality of it all, the robed figures, the swirling incense, the deep, resonant voices echoing through the trees, the collective energy of hundreds, perhaps thousands of people gathered for a shared spiritual experience. It must have been truly awe-inspiring, a visceral sensory overload designed to imprint the sacred onto the very soul of the community. After the Roman suppression, the Druids largely vanished from the historical record. Their oral tradition, once their strength, became their vulnerability in a world increasingly dominated by written accounts. First Roman, then Christian. For a long time, the only sources available were those hostile Roman writers, who, as you've seen, painted a picture of barbaric, human-sacrificing priests. This Roman narrative dominated for over a millennium, making the Druid a shadowy, often monstrous figure in the historical imagination. It's a classic case of the victors writing history, and in this case, they weren't exactly flattering their defeated opponents. You notice a peculiar stone, flatter than the others, with a subtle depression in its center. Perhaps an offering stone, where libations of mead or blood were poured, soaking into the earth as a direct communication with the spirits below. This constant act of giving back to the earth, recognizing its life-giving force, was fundamental. They understood that their existence was entirely dependent on the land's generosity, and their rituals were a way of reciprocating that sacred relationship. It was a spiritual contract, written not on parchment, but in the very soil. Then came the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Centuries later, and with them, a renewed interest in antiquity, including the pre-Roman past of Europe. But this wasn't a dispassionate academic inquiry. It was often fueled by nationalistic pride and a desire to find noble, ancient origins for the emerging nations of Britain and France. Suddenly, the barbaric Celts and their Druids started to get a PR makeover. They were no longer savage priests, but wise philosophers, guardians of ancient wisdom, and noble patriots who resisted foreign tyranny. It's like a historical glow-up, complete with new outfits and a much better backstory. A less commonly known detail about their rituals, often overlooked, is the profound importance of water sources. Sacred wells, springs, and rivers were considered gateways to the other world, places where deities resided and where powerful healing or divinatory properties could be found. The Druids would lead pilgrims to these sites, guiding them in rituals of purification, healing, and seeking prophetic visions. Imagine plunging your hands into icy, clear water, feeling its ancient energy, believing it could wash away illness or reveal glimpses of your future. It's like the ultimate spiritual spa day, but with a lot more ritual and a lot less cucumber water. Many valuable offerings, including weapons, jewelry, and even bog bodies have been found in these watery places, suggesting they were powerful points of exchange with the divine. A common historical fact is that much of the modern popular image of the Druids cloaked figures performing rites at Stonehenge. Worshipping the sun, gathering mistletoe with golden sickles was largely constructed in the 17th and 18th centuries. This period saw the rise of what is known as Neo-Druidism, a movement that, while drawing inspiration from the sparse ancient accounts, was primarily a product of contemporary philosophical and romantic ideals. They filled in the gaps in knowledge with noble savagery, ancient wisdom, and a good deal of imagination. It's like they found a few scattered puzzle pieces and decided to invent the rest of the picture themselves. The concept of oath-taking also held immense spiritual weight in Druidic society, often involving elaborate rituals. An oath sworn before a Druid, particularly at a sacred site, was considered unbreakable, binding not just the individual but their entire lineage. To break such an oath was to invite divine wrath and societal ostracism. You can imagine the gravity of such a moment, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the Druid, the weight of the ancestors and the gods bearing down as vows were made. It gave their justice system a profound, almost terrifying spiritual enforcement mechanism. No need for complicated contracts or notarized documents when a divine curse looms large over your head. For example, the association of Druids with Stonehenge is almost entirely a creation of this period. While Stonehenge is undeniably a prehistoric monument of immense spiritual significance, there is no direct archaeological or historical evidence to link its construction or primary use to the ancient Druids. It predates the known flourishing of Druidism by at least 1,000 years. However, the monumental scale and mysterious purpose of Stonehenge perfectly fit the romanticized image of a powerful, wise priesthood, so people just kind of ran with it. It's a classic case of it looks cool, so it must be true. Within these rituals, the Druids employed various forms of divination. They would interpret omens from the flight of birds, the patterns of smoke from sacred fires, the entrails of sacrificed animals, or even the cries and convulsions of human victims again. If Roman accounts are to be believed, this wasn't just fortune-telling. It was a serious attempt to understand the will of the gods and to gain insight into the future. Guiding tribal decisions from war strategies to marriage alliances? Imagine having a personal psychic on retainer for every major life decision. But their methods involved rather less crystal ball gazing and rather more bird watching with deep existential meaning. Historians still debate the precise methods and extent of Druidic divination practices, with many modern scholars questioning the veracity of the more sensational Roman claims. One of the most influential figures in shaping this modern myth was William Stukeley, an 18th century antiquarian. He was one of the first to propose that Stonehenge was a Druid temple, and even developed elaborate theories about their astronomical knowledge and philosophical insights. Stukeley, an Anglican clergyman, even attempted to reconcile Druidism with early Christianity, suggesting a shared, ancient monotheistic tradition. He effectively created the gentleman Druid, a far cry from Caesar's barbarian. It's like he decided the ancient mystics needed better tailoring and a more respectable spiritual resume. Their connection to the land was so absolute that even the construction of their stone circles was a spiritual act. These weren't just feats of engineering. They were carefully designed to harness cosmic energies and mark celestial events. The alignments of stones at places like Stonehenge and Avebury were astronomical observatories of remarkable precision. You visualize Druids standing in these vast, open-air temples, tracking the solstices and equinoxes, using the movements of the sun and moon to inform their agricultural cycles and ritual calendars. The stones were not just inanimate objects. They were instruments for understanding the divine order of the universe. It's like building your entire life schedule around the sunrise and sunset, but with a few extra 1,000 pounds of granite involved. Another obscure detail in this reimagining of the Druids is the popular image of them using a golden sickle to cut mistletoe. While Pliny the Elder, a Roman writer, did mention Druids performing a ritual involving mistletoe and a golden sickle. He describes it as a very rare event, done to collect a specific medicinal plant, not as a daily or common practice. This single, brief account was later amplified and romanticized into a defining characteristic of Druidic ritual, becoming almost synonymous with their image. It's like taking one mention of someone owning a fancy kitchen gadget and turning it into their entire identity. The chanting and invocations were integral to their rites. Though no direct records of Druidic incantations exist, we can surmise from later Celtic traditions that they involved rhythmic speech, repetitive sounds, and perhaps even forms of ancient poetry designed to induce altered states of consciousness or to directly communicate with the spirit world. You can almost hear the low hum, the rising crescendo of voices, the way the sound would have vibrated through the very stones. A living, breathing soundscape designed to transport participants to a different plane of existence. It was the original sound bath, only with slightly more ancient spirits. The Romantic movement of the 19th century further cemented this idealized image. Poets, artists, and writers, yearning for a spiritual connection to nature and a sense of ancient British identity, embraced the Druid as a symbol of wisdom, freedom, and harmony with the natural world. They became figures of inspiration, embodying a primal purity untouched by the corruptions of modern society. This period saw a deluge of poems, paintings, and plays featuring noble Druids communing with nature, resisting Roman oppression, and guarding timeless secrets. It was a full-blown Druid revival, minus the actual ancient Druids. Consider the role of trees in these rituals, especially the oak and the sacred mistletoe. The Druids venerated the oak as a symbol of strength, wisdom, and longevity, often performing ceremonies within oak groves. Mistletoe, a parasitic plant that nonetheless thrived on the oak, was considered highly sacred, believed to hold potent medicinal and magical properties. The ritualistic cutting of mistletoe with a golden sickle during the waxing moon was a solemn event, a profound act of communion with the tree and the spirits it harbored. You imagine the reverence in their movements, the precise cuts, the careful handling of the precious plant. It's a reminder of their deep, almost symbiotic relationship with the botanical world, a bond far stronger than your occasional lament about your dying houseplant. The lack of primary source material for the ancient Druids ironically allowed for this rich tapestry of myth to flourish. With so few hard facts, there was ample room for speculation, idealization, and projection. Everyone could imagine their own version of the wise ancient priest, fitting them into whatever contemporary philosophical or political narrative they wished. This vacuum of information became a canvas for imaginative reinterpretations. It's like being given a tiny, blurry photo and being asked to paint a mural based on it. You have a lot of creative freedom. Fire, too, played a central role in their rituals, particularly during the fire festivals of Beltane and Samhain. Bonfires were lit on hilltops, acting as beacons for purification, protection, and renewal. Cattle were sometimes driven between two fires for purification, and people might leap over flames for good luck. You can almost feel the heat radiating from these ancient bonfires, smell the wood smoke mingling with the damp earth, and hear the crackle and roar of the flames as they consumed offerings and cleansed the community. Fire was a transformative element, a bridge between worlds, and a powerful symbol of the sun's life-giving energy. It was a spectacle, certainly, but also a deeply symbolic act of cleansing and rebirth. Historians still debate the true balance between archaeological evidence, classical accounts, and later Celtic literary traditions like the Irish sagas and Welsh Mabinogion in reconstructing a nuanced understanding of the ancient Druids. How much of what we think we know is based on solid ground? And how much is a reflection of later cultural biases and romantic inclinations? The layers of interpretation make it incredibly difficult to separate the historical grain from the mythical chaff. It's like trying to find the original message in a game of historical telephone. The Druids also employed ritualistic feasting. After important ceremonies, communal meals would be shared, solidifying bonds within the tribe and with the divine. Food, often the produce of the land, would be offered as a gift to the gods before being consumed by the community. These feasts were not just about sustenance, they were about shared spiritual experience, a tangible expression of gratitude and interconnectedness. You can almost taste the roasted meat, the wild berries, the earthy bread, all eaten with a profound awareness of the spiritual journey that had just unfolded. It was dining with a purpose, with every bite infused with sacred meaning. The Irish and Welsh literary traditions, compiled centuries after the Roman conquest and heavily influenced by Christian scribes, also played a complex role. While they contain rich material about early Celtic society, law, and myth, and mention figures clearly identifiable as pre-Christian religious specialists like the Fili and Brehons, it's challenging to directly equate them with the Gaulish and British Druids described by the Romans. These texts provide valuable insights into Celtic worldview, but they are not direct windows into pre-Roman Druidism. It's like trying to understand medieval England solely from a modern fantasy novel inspired by it. There are elements, but also a lot of artistic license. The secrecy surrounding their rituals was paramount. Unlike many ancient religions that left detailed written records, the Druids committed everything to memory and practiced their rites away from prying eyes, often deep within sacred groves or secluded stone circles. This secrecy fostered an air of mystery and heightened their authority, making them seem more powerful and their knowledge more arcane. It also ensured that their wisdom remained exclusive to the initiated, preserving its purity and preventing it from falling into unworthy hands. It's like their version of a highly exclusive club, where the only membership requirement was about 2 decades of intense memorization and a willingness to brave the elements. Modern neo-paganism and contemporary Druidry continue this tradition of reimagining the Druids. These modern movements often emphasize ecological awareness, nature spirituality, personal growth, and a connection to ancient Celtic heritage. They are largely reconstructive, drawing inspiration from the fragmentary historical evidence and integrating it with modern spiritual practices. They are not direct descendants of the ancient Druids, but rather modern expressions of a spiritual yearning for a connection to the natural world and an ancient, wise past. It's a bit like a band doing a very respectful and well-researched cover version of an ancient, barely heard song. When you consider the full scope of their ritual practices, you realize that for the Celtic people, spirituality wasn't something confined to a specific day or a specific building. It was woven into the very fabric of their lives, from birth to death, from sowing to harvest, from peace to war. The Druids, through their intricate rituals, ensured this constant connection, guiding their people through the seen and unseen worlds. They were the masters of ceremony, the gatekeepers of the sacred, and the living embodiment of their people's spiritual identity. Their practices were not just performances, they were profound acts of creation, communion, and cosmic alignment. The fascination with Druids also touches on the concept of lost knowledge. The idea that these ancient priests possessed profound wisdom about healing, astronomy, magic, or philosophy that was lost to time adds to their allure. This plays into a human desire for hidden truths and secret traditions, suggesting that there's more to the past than what conventional history tells us. You might find yourself drawn to the idea of uncovering these forgotten secrets, hoping for a key to ancient mysteries. You imagine the feeling of participating in one of these ancient rites. The cold, damp air, the scent of burning herbs, the deep, rhythmic chants, the flickering light of bonfires illuminating ancient stones. It would have been an experience designed to transcend the mundane, to connect you directly with the vast, powerful forces of nature and the unseen spirits. It was a world where every rustle in the leaves, every shift in the wind, every ray of sunlight held meaning, interpreted and guided by the wise and mysterious Druids. It leaves you with a profound respect for their dedication, their intricate understanding of the natural world, and their unwavering belief in the powerful, pulsating life that existed all around them. Even in your modern, cynical mind, you can almost feel the echoes of their ancient power reverberating through the very ground beneath your feet. It's a feeling that will stay with you long after the mist finally lifts. The modern Druid image is often serene and wise, a far cry from the Roman portrayal of bloodthirsty sacrificers. This shift reflects societal changes and a desire to find more positive, life-affirming spiritual paths. It's a testament to the power of cultural narratives to evolve and adapt over time, shaping figures from the past to serve contemporary needs and aspirations. It's like giving a historical villain a redemption arc, centuries after they've been written off. You stand at the edge of the ancient clearing, the mist still swirling, but now a chill, sharper than before, touches your skin. You've journeyed through the Druids' deep connection to nature, their multifaceted roles, and the grandeur of their seasonal rituals. Now, you must confront the most unsettling and controversial aspect of their alleged practices, the truth, or perhaps the terrifying rumors surrounding their use of sacrifice. This is where the comfortable mystique of the wise nature priest gives way to a darker, more chilling possibility, one that has captivated and repulsed historians and casual observers alike for centuries. Despite the historical complexities, the enduring appeal of the Druids lies in their connection to the natural world. In an increasingly urbanized and technologically driven society, the image of ancient priests communing with trees, rivers, and stones resonates deeply with a desire for simplicity, wildness, and a spiritual connection to the earth. This is why you see so many modern groups gather at ancient sites, feeling a pull towards what they perceive as a more authentic, grounded way of life. The very word sacrifice conjures up primal images. But for the Druids, as for many ancient cultures, it was not merely an act of cruelty, it was a profound spiritual transaction, a means of communicating with the divine, of offering something precious to gain favor, appease wrath, or unlock prophecies. In their animistic worldview, where everything possessed a spirit, the life force itself was the most potent offering. You try to rationalize it, to understand the mindset that could lead to such acts. It's a fundamental disconnect from your modern sensibilities, where the value of a single life is paramount. For them, perhaps, the individual was always subsumed by the greater cosmic balance. Ultimately, the Druids exist now in a liminal space, between verifiable history and powerful mythology. They are figures upon whom we project our own desires for ancient wisdom, ecological harmony, and a connection to a lost past. The awful secrets are no longer about the specifics of their rituals, but the uncomfortable truth that much of what we know about them is built on a foundation of educated guesswork and romanticized projection. When you think of Druidic sacrifice, one image almost immediately springs to mind: the Wicker Man. This terrifying effigy, described by Julius Caesar in his commentaries on the Gallic War, was said to be a massive human-shaped cage woven from wicker, filled with live victims, both human and animal, and then set ablaze. Imagine the scene: the colossal figure looming against the twilight sky, its intricate basketry holding desperate souls, the crackle of fire, the screams. It's the stuff of nightmares. Isn't it Caesar claimed the Gauls used it for sacrifices to their gods, especially when facing great danger or to ensure the success of military campaigns? He details that great numbers of men are immolated in these wicker figures, and they suppose that the immortal gods are appeased by the sacrifice of such persons. As you consider the Druids through this modern lens, you realize that their most potent legacy might not be their historical accuracy, but their enduring capacity to inspire, to challenge, and to connect us to a primal sense of wonder about the ancient world. They are a reminder that history is not just a collection of facts, but a continuously evolving story, shaped by those who tell it, and those who choose to listen. The whispers of the past continue, but now, they're joined by the voices of those in the present, still seeking to understand the enduring mystery of the ancient Druids. But here's the rub, and it's a big one. Caesar is our primary, and often only, direct source for such gruesome details. And as you remember, history written by conquerors tends to be embellished. Roman propaganda often sought to portray their enemies as barbaric and uncivilized, making their conquests seem not just necessary, but morally justified. Historians still debate the accuracy and extent of Caesar's accounts of Druidic human sacrifice, with many modern scholars suggesting they were exaggerated for political purposes or even entirely fabricated to demonize the Celts. It's a very convenient narrative, isn't it, to paint your enemies as monstrous, especially when you're about to invade their lands. You can almost hear Caesar pitching his war memoirs, and then there were the giant burning effigies. Trust me, it was very dramatic. Good for sales. You've traversed the mythical landscapes and the battlegrounds of history, seen how the Druids were both revered and feared, and how their image has been reshaped over millennia. Now, let's peel back the layers of grand ceremony and Roman conflict to imagine a more intimate picture of the daily life of a Druid. What was it like to wake up in their world, to live, eat, and breathe under the spiritual framework they so carefully maintained? You're about to experience a day, or perhaps a series of moments, that reveal how their profound beliefs permeated every single aspect of their existence, from the mundane to the sacred. Forget your morning coffee ritual. Theirs involved a lot more misty contemplation and probably less complaining about Wi-Fi. However, we can't dismiss all claims of human sacrifice outright. Archaeological evidence, while not definitively proving the Wicker Man scenario, does point towards ritualistic killings among Celtic peoples. The most famous examples are the bog bodies, such as Lindo Man, discovered in peat bogs across northern Europe. These incredibly well-preserved bodies, some dating back to the Iron Age, show signs of violent death strangulation, throat slitting, head trauma often combined with evidence of ritualistic preparation, like a last meal of mistletoe or grain. Lindo Man, for instance, appears to have been struck twice on the head, had his throat cut, and was then strangled with a sinew cord before being deposited in the bog. Imagine waking before dawn in a simple wattle and daub dwelling, perhaps within a small fortified settlement, or deep within a sacred grove. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. There's no alarm clock, just the subtle shift in the sky, perhaps the first chirping of birds, signaling the sun's imminent arrival. As a druid, your day wouldn't begin with a scroll through social media, but with an inward turning, a mental preparation for the sacred duties ahead. You might perform a simple cleansing ritual, perhaps washing in a nearby stream, connecting with the flowing water as a symbol of purification and renewal. You shiver, imagining the cold, dark water enveloping the victim, preserving them in a chilling tableau. Was this a Wicker Man victim, or something else entirely? These bog bodies are often found in places that were considered sacred, at the boundaries between land and water, suggesting they were offerings to the deities of the earth and underworld. They weren't just murdered and dumped. There was a clear ritualistic component to their demise and deposition. The exact purpose of these sacrifices, however, remains a subject of intense academic scrutiny. Were they criminals, prisoners of war, voluntary offerings, or even kings ritually killed at the end of their reign? The peat bogs hold their secrets close. Your breakfast would be simple, hearty fare, reflecting the seasons and the produce of the land, perhaps some gruel made from oats or barley, a piece of flatbread, and fresh berries or nuts gathered from the forest. There are no processed foods here. Every meal is a direct connection to the bounty of the earth, a subtle reminder of the druidic reverence for nature. You'd eat with purpose, silently acknowledging the life that sustains you. It's a lot healthier than that microwaved burrito you had this morning, isn't it? Beyond the more dramatic claims, it's highly probable that animal sacrifice was a regular and integral part of druidic ritual. This was a common practice across many ancient cultures, a way of offering valuable sustenance to the gods in exchange for blessings or to mark important events. You can imagine herds of cattle, sheep, or pigs being led to sacred groves, their blood offered to the earth, their meat perhaps shared in communal feasts afterward. It was a tangible act of giving back to the divine, a recognition that all life flowed from the gods. This would have been a much more common sight than a burning Wicker Man, and far less sensational for Roman chroniclers to report. After these personal rituals, your duties would begin. For a young, aspiring druid, much of the day would be dedicated to study and memorization. Remember those 20 years of training. It wasn't just theory. You'd be reciting ancient poems, learning complex legal precedents, committing to memory the medicinal properties of every plant and herb within the territory, and charting the movements of the stars. This wasn't passive learning. It was active engagement, often involving rhythmic chanting, call and response with a mentor, and perhaps even walking specific paths to ingrain information through spatial memory. Your brain would be a living library, constantly updated and meticulously indexed. Think about the motivations behind such acts. In a world utterly dependent on the whims of nature, the sun for crops, the rain for water, the health of livestock for survival, people sought every possible means to influence the unseen forces. Sacrifice, even human sacrifice, could be seen as the ultimate bargain, the most powerful plea to secure the survival and prosperity of the tribe. If a terrible famine threatened, or a powerful enemy advanced, perhaps the most desperate measures were considered justified to avert disaster. It's a terrifying logic, born out of profound fear and immense spiritual conviction. For a more senior druid, the day could involve a multitude of roles. You might be sought out to mediate disputes between families or tribes, sitting as a judge under an ancient oak, listening patiently to both sides before reciting the appropriate traditional law or precedent. Your wisdom and impartiality would be paramount, your judgment final. Imagine the pressure of being the Supreme Court and the local town council, all rolled into one. No wonder they commanded such respect. A less discussed, but equally important, aspect of sacrifice for the Druids might have been votive offerings, the dedication of valuable objects, rather than living beings. Swords, shields, chariots, jewelry, and other precious goods have been found in rivers, lakes, and bogs, often intentionally broken or bent, indicating they were offerings to deities or spirits associated with water. You picture a warrior, after a victorious battle, solemnly dropping his prized sword into a shimmering lake, a silent prayer of gratitude, an acknowledgement of the divine hand in his triumph. These weren't just discarded items. They were sacred gifts, imbued with personal significance, given back to the natural world. You might spend hours tending to the sick and injured. Your knowledge of herbal medicine would be encyclopedic, allowing you to prepare poultices, tinctures, and healing brews from plants gathered with ritual precision. You wouldn't just treat the body, you'd also address the spiritual and emotional well-being of the patient, using incantations, blessings, and perhaps even dream interpretation to aid in their recovery. It was holistic medicine long before the term existed, and probably more effective than that dodgy cough syrup you bought last winter. The concept of consecration also relates to sacrifice, though without the loss of life. Objects, places, or even individuals could be consecrated to the gods. Set apart for sacred purposes, a grove might be consecrated, making it forbidden for ordinary use. A particular tree might be consecrated, becoming an object of worship. This act of setting something apart, making it sacred, was a form of symbolic offering, dedicating it to the divine realm. It's like dedicating a building today, but with way more ancient chants and way less ribbon cutting. Beyond the immediate needs of the community, Druids played a vital role in advising tribal chiefs and kings. You'd be present at tribal councils, offering counsel based on your knowledge of history, prophecy, and the will of the gods. Your foresight and understanding of omens could influence decisions on everything from agricultural planning to declarations of war. This wasn't just about political power, it was about spiritual guidance, ensuring that human actions aligned with cosmic harmony. Another chilling possibility, again largely gleaned from Roman sources and later Irish myths, involves divination through human sacrifice. Some accounts suggest that the Druids would observe the convulsions and death throes of a sacrificed victim, or examine their entrails, to glean prophecies about the future. This is a particularly grim detail, if true, transforming a horrific act into a tool for understanding the divine will. Imagine the pressure on the Druid, desperately seeking answers for their tribe in such a horrific manner. It paints a picture of a spiritual system that, while deeply connected to nature, that could also be utterly ruthless in its pursuit of divine knowledge. A common historical fact is that the Druids acted as advisors and counselors to the Celtic nobility and ruling classes. They weren't just religious figures, they were integral to the governance and strategic decisions of Celtic society. Their influence extended into secular matters, making them powerful figures who helped shape the direction of their communities. Their role was much broader than simply overseeing religious ceremonies. The Roman suppression of Druidism often highlighted these alleged barbaric practices as a justification for their brutal conquest. They presented themselves as bringing civilization to the savages of Gaul and Britain, and the tales of human sacrifice were potent tools in this narrative. The destruction of sacred groves, the executions of Druids, and the suppression of their rituals were all framed as necessary actions to bring order and Roman law to the conquered lands. It was a classic good guys versus bad guys story, with the Romans firmly casting themselves as the heroes, and the Druids, conveniently, as the villains who burned people in giant wicker baskets. An obscure detail about their daily lives, based on inferences from archaeological finds and later Celtic texts, is the importance of personal divination and omen, reading even for seemingly small matters. A druid might not just consult the stars for grand prophecies, but also for guidance on optimal planting times, the best day for a journey, or even the auspiciousness of a particular hunt. Every decision, big or small, was potentially infused with meaning and guided by their interpretation of the natural world's subtle signs. It's like having a magical, ancient version of a daily horoscope app. But with higher stakes and no annoying pop-up ads, a truly obscure detail about druidic sacrifice, often overlooked due to its lack of sensationalism, is the potential for self-sacrifice or extreme asceticism as a form of offering. While not a direct killing of another, some scholars suggest that individuals might have undertaken extreme fasts, endured prolonged exposure to the elements, or performed other physically demanding acts as a personal offering to the gods, seeking spiritual insight or purification. This would have been a more personal, less public form of sacrifice, demonstrating profound devotion and a willingness to suffer for spiritual gain. It's like extreme fasting meets ultra-marathoning, but with ancient deities watching your every agonizing step. You'd also spend time in the sacred groves, those natural cathedrals of the Druidic faith. These weren't just places for grand ceremonies, but sites for daily contemplation, prayer, and quiet ritual. You might walk among the ancient trees, feeling their energy, listening to the whispers of the wind, and connecting with the spirits of the land. This daily communion would reinforce your spiritual connection and deepen your understanding of the interconnectedness of all life. It was their office, their church, and their meditation retreat, all rolled into one beautiful, moss-covered package. The enduring debate around druidic sacrifice highlights the difficulty of understanding ancient cultures through biased lenses. While the gruesome images of the Wicker Man are deeply ingrained in popular culture, driven largely by Roman propaganda and later sensationalist accounts, the archaeological evidence presents a more nuanced, albeit still dark, picture. There's undeniable proof of ritualistic violence and deposition of human remains in sacred sites. But the motivations, frequency, and exact nature of these acts remain largely conjectural. The Druidic calendar, deeply tied to the cycles of the sun and moon, governed much of their daily and yearly rhythm. You'd be acutely aware of the solstices, equinoxes, and cross-quarter festivals, preparing the community for the appropriate rites and celebrations. Your internal clock would be set by the celestial movements, not by a digital device. Every phase of the moon, every shift in the sun's path, would hold significance. Guiding your practices and the life of your people, you contemplate the moral chasm between your world and theirs. For you, the deliberate taking of a human life is an unspeakable act. For them, in certain extreme circumstances, it might have been seen as a necessary, even noble act to preserve the collective, to honor the gods, to avert a greater catastrophe. It's a chilling reminder that morality is often a product of its time and culture. You can judge, certainly, but to truly understand, you must try to shed your modern lens, however briefly, and step into their stark, ancient world, where the boundaries between life and death, sacred and profane, were perhaps far more fluid than you can comprehend. Part of your daily routine might involve teaching younger druid apprentices. You would patiently guide them through memorization exercises, explain the nuances of a particular ritual, or demonstrate the proper way to identify and prepare a medicinal herb. This intergenerational transfer of knowledge was crucial for the survival of their tradition, a never-ending cycle of learning and teaching. It's a bit like being a professor who also has to remember every lecture perfectly, because there's no textbook for the students to buy. As you step away from the imagined scene of sacrifice, the mist seems to clear slightly, but the uncomfortable questions linger. The Druids were wise healers, teachers, and judges. But were they also, at times, capable of profound and terrifying acts of violence in the name of their spiritual beliefs? The answer, like so much about the Druids, remains shrouded in the mists of time, debated by scholars, and forever etched in the unsettling stories that have survived the centuries. You're left with a sense of the complex, often contradictory nature of their beliefs, a tapestry woven with threads of deep reverence for life and potentially profound acts of death. Beyond formal instruction, Druids would also serve as storytellers and bards. In the evenings, gathered around a crackling fire, you might recite epic tales of heroes, gods, and ancestors, weaving history, mythology, and moral lessons into captivating narratives. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were the living history and moral code of their people, passed down through generations, ensuring cultural continuity and instilling a sense of shared identity. Imagine listening to a story that's been told for hundreds of years, knowing that it holds the very essence of your people. It's probably better than most things on Netflix. You find yourself drifting now, no longer fixed in one spot, but moving through the ethereal landscape of Druidic thought. You've grappled with their earthly roles and the darker shadows of their ritualistic practices. Now, prepare to enter the grand, sprawling architecture of their minds, to understand how they saw the very fabric of existence, from the smallest blade of grass to the vast, swirling cosmos. This is their cosmology, their understanding of the universe, a worldview deeply imbued with animism, reverence for nature, and a profound belief in cycles of life, death, and rebirth. It's like trying to understand the operating system of an ancient, organic supercomputer. The Druids' attire, while perhaps simple for daily wear, would always carry symbolic meaning. You'd favor natural fabrics like wool and linen, often in earthy tones that blended with the environment. For more formal occasions, the white robes, symbolizing purity and sanctity, would be donned. Certain adornments, like torques, neck rings, or armbands, might denote rank or spiritual achievement. Every element of their appearance likely conveyed a message, a visual representation of their role and connection to the sacred. At the very core of Druidic spiritual beliefs, and indeed Celtic spirituality, was the concept of reincarnation. This wasn't some fuzzy, New Age notion. It was a fundamental, deeply held conviction that the soul was immortal and passed from one body to another after death. Imagine the freedom that belief might have instilled, a fearlessness in battle, a philosophical acceptance of life's hardships, knowing that this earthly existence was but one chapter in an endless journey. You might die today, but your spirit would simply move on, perhaps into another human, an animal, or even a tree. It lends a certain don't sweat the small stuff vibe to ancient warfare, doesn't it? As Julius Caesar famously noted, the Druids maintain that souls do not perish, but pass after death from one body to another, and they consider that this is the greatest incentive to valor, as the fear of death is thereby disregarded. This is a widely accepted historical fact about their beliefs. Historians still debate the specific social stratification within the Druidic order itself, and whether there were distinct subclasses or specialized roles, bards, seers, judges that would have led to different daily routines for individual Druids. Were all Druids equally versed in all areas, or did some specialize heavily in law, others in healing, and still others in prophecy? Our sources are too limited to provide a definitive answer, leaving us to piece together the puzzle from tantalizing fragments. This belief in the transmigration of souls meant that the boundaries between life and death were far more fluid than you perceive them today. Death wasn't an end, it was a transition, a journey to the other world, only to eventually return to the physical plane. This cyclical view extended to everything: the seasons, the sun's journey across the sky, the growth and decay of plants. There was no linear progression towards a single end, only an eternal ebb and flow, a constant dance of becoming and unbecoming. It's like the universe was running on a perpetual loop, always refreshing, always beginning anew. The Druids' day would also involve a deep engagement with the natural world, not just for ritual, but for sustenance and knowledge. You'd forage for edible plants, identify tracking signs of animals, and keenly observe the weather patterns, understanding the intricate balance of the ecosystem. This wasn't just survival, it was a living prayer, a constant acknowledgement of the land as sacred and interconnected. Every root, every leaf, every feather had a story and a purpose. Their pantheon of gods and goddesses was vast and multifaceted, often linked directly to natural phenomena, animals, and specific tribal functions. You don't see a single, all-powerful deity, but a rich tapestry of divine beings embodying various aspects of the world. There were gods of the sun, goddesses of the rivers, deities of the forests, and patrons of warriors, healers, and craftsmen. They weren't distant, aloof figures. They were immanent, present in the rustle of leaves, the flow of water, the warmth of the sun on your skin. It was a polytheistic religion, but one where every tree had a potential spirit, and every spring a divine guardian. It's like every natural feature had its own patron saint. Only they were probably less concerned with prayer requests and more with whether you respected their sacred space. Even moments of conflict would involve the Druids. While they rarely engaged in direct combat, their presence on the battlefield, uttering imprecations or attempting to negotiate truces, was not uncommon. Their spiritual authority could sway the tide of battle, either by bolstering the courage of their own warriors or by striking fear into the hearts of their enemies. You can almost see them standing calmly amidst the chaos, their voices cutting through the din of swords and shouts. The veneration of nature was not merely symbolic, it was practical and profound. For the Druids, the natural world was not just a resource, it was alive, sacred, and filled with divine presence. Trees, especially the mighty oak, were revered as sacred. Groves were considered outdoor temples, places where the veil between worlds was thin. Rivers and springs were gateways to the other world, often associated with healing and prophecy. You imagine their reverence when they approached a towering ancient tree, understanding it not just as wood and leaves, but as a living, breathing entity with a spirit of its own, a silent witness to centuries of life. It's a far cry from your approach to a forest, which might involve a quick selfie and a mental note about mosquito repellent. The Druids were also responsible for certain crafts and magical workings. While not blacksmiths or weavers in the conventional sense, they might oversee the creation of sacred objects, imbue tools with protective charms, or prepare amulets for the community. Their understanding of the properties of materials and the power of symbols would be applied to ensure the spiritual efficacy of these items. It was like they were the spiritual engineers of their time, building invisible bridges between worlds. The concept of the other world was also central to their cosmology. This wasn't a hell or a heaven in the Abrahamic sense, but a parallel realm, sometimes described as an island paradise, sometimes as an underground domain, where the gods resided and where spirits went after death before their eventual return. It was a place of eternal youth, abundance, and magic, a place that could occasionally intersect with the mortal realm. Heroes might journey there, or deities might emerge from it. It was a vibrant, active spiritual dimension, not a static afterlife. Think of it as a divine vacation resort, but instead of sandy beaches, it had shimmering mists and endless feasts, as the sun would set, casting long shadows across the ancient lands. Your day would draw to a close. You might gather with fellow Druids for shared contemplation, to discuss interpretations of omens, or to simply enjoy the quiet camaraderie of shared purpose. The night sky, free from light pollution, would be a canvas for astronomical observation, for charting the paths of constellations, and for seeking guidance from the distant stars. A lesser-known detail about their cosmology involves the concept of Awen. While not explicitly a Druidic term from ancient sources, it's widely adopted in modern Druidry, and believed to represent a concept fundamental to their ancient worldview, the flow of divine inspiration, poetic genius, and creative energy. It's often depicted as 3 rays of light, symbolizing the earth, sea, and sky, or perhaps truth, knowledge, and justice. Imagine the Druids seeking to open themselves to this flow, to become conduits for this divine spark, whether in crafting prophecies, composing epic poems, or delivering legal judgments. It's like their spiritual Wi-Fi signal, connecting them directly to the universe's creative energy. They weren't just smart, they were downloading divine insights. Your sleep would perhaps be less about personal rest and more about spiritual journeys, about dreams as messages from the other world, and about deep communion with the ancestors. The boundaries between waking life and the spiritual realm were blurred for a Druid, with every moment holding potential meaning and connection to the divine. It's safe to say their sleep cycle was probably a little different from yours. Their understanding of time was also cyclical, not linear. The year was marked by the turning of the seasons, the cycle of birth, growth, decay, and rebirth. This was reflected in their festivals, which were precisely aligned with agricultural and astronomical events. They observed the movements of the sun, moon, and stars with remarkable accuracy, not just for practical purposes like telling time or navigating, but because they believed these celestial bodies embodied divine forces and held clues to the universe's grand design. Their knowledge of astronomy suggests they viewed the cosmos as a living, breathing entity, a giant clockwork of divine intention. You probably rely on your phone for tomorrow's weather, but they were reading the cosmic almanac in the night sky, in every breath, every step, every interaction. The Druids lived their beliefs. Their philosophy wasn't confined to abstract thought. It was woven into the very fabric of their daily existence, making their lives a continuous, living prayer to the forces of the cosmos and the spirit of the earth. Their wisdom wasn't just learned, it was embodied. The Druids also believed in a delicate balance within the universe, between opposing forces light and dark, life and death, order and chaos. Their rituals and practices were often aimed at maintaining or restoring this balance, ensuring harmony within the tribe and between humanity and the natural world. If the balance was disturbed by human action, by an external threat, or by divine displeasure, it could lead to famine, plague, or defeat. Their role was to be the cosmic engineers, ensuring the gears of existence continued to turn smoothly. It's like they were constantly performing spiritual diagnostics on the universe, making sure there were no fatal errors. You've stood in the ancient groves, felt the weight of druidic wisdom, witnessed their clash with Roman might, and even imagined the quiet rhythm of their daily lives. Now, as the final mists of our journey begin to swirl, we arrive at the eternal mystery, a moment to reflect on the enigmatic legacy of the Druids and the many questions that, despite our explorations, still remain unanswered. It's like reaching the end of a really good mystery novel, only to find the last page is blank, and you're left with a sense of wonder and a few lingering, tantalizing clues. Their animistic worldview extended to the very elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Each was seen as sacred and imbued with spirit. Earth provided sustenance and was the resting place of ancestors. Water was purifying and a conduit to the other world. Air carried breath and spirit. Fire was transformative, cleansing, and a source of life and warmth. You can almost feel the tangible presence of these elements in their ceremonies. The earth beneath their feet, the wind in their hair, the smoke from sacred fires curling into the sky, the cold, clear water of a holy well. It was a constant sensory communion with the foundational building blocks of their world. The Druids, as a defined, powerful, and unified priesthood, effectively disappeared from overt historical record after the Roman conquest. Their oral tradition, which was their strength in transmitting vast amounts of knowledge without written texts, ironically contributed to their historical silence. When the Romans systematically dismantled their schools and persecuted their practitioners, the very mechanism for preserving their knowledge was disrupted. It's almost too neat, isn't it? A society that relies on memory, destroyed by those who built an empire on writing things down? You can imagine the quiet despair, the gradual fading of voices that once held entire libraries in their minds. While we discuss their sophisticated cosmology, historians still debate the extent to which the Druids possessed a unified, formalized theological system, or if their beliefs varied significantly across different Celtic tribes and regions. Were they a single, coherent priesthood with a shared doctrine, or more of a loose confederation of spiritual leaders whose practices adapted to local traditions? The lack of written records makes it incredibly difficult to reconstruct a definitive Druidic Bible or catechism. It's like trying to reconstruct the entire history of modern thought based solely on a few social media posts and archaeological digs. Good luck with that. The enduring mystery isn't just what they knew, but how they knew it. Their astronomical observations, their understanding of herbal medicine, their complex legal codes all passed down through rigorous memorization. Imagine trying to learn everything you know about the world, from science to history to law, without ever writing a single note. Your brain would be a supercomputer, constantly processing and recalling. The dedication required for such a feat, both from the teachers and the students, borders on the unfathomable in our text-heavy world. It makes those 20 years of training seem even more formidable. The concept of totem animals likely played a significant role in their understanding of the world. Certain animals bears stags, boars, ravens. Salmon were seen as embodying specific divine qualities, or as having a special connection to certain deities. They might have been considered sacred, their characteristics studied for wisdom or prophecy, or even seen as spirit guides. You can imagine a druid observing the cunning of a fox, the strength of a bull, or the wisdom of an owl, integrating these observations into their spiritual insights and teachings. It was a zoology lesson with profound spiritual implications. One of the most profound unanswered questions revolves around their exact theological beliefs. We know they revered nature, the sun, moon, and stars, and had a concept of an other world and reincarnation. But what was their cosmology in detail? Did they have a pantheon of gods akin to the Greek or Roman deities? Or were their divine forces more elemental and abstract? Were there specific myths and narratives that explained creation or the purpose of life? Our knowledge is largely based on interpretations of archaeological findings, Roman observations often biased, and later Celtic myths filtered through a Christian lens. It's like trying to reconstruct a masterpiece painting from a few scattered, faded brushstrokes. Their understanding of sacred geometry and ley lines is another fascinating, though often speculative, aspect of their cosmology. While direct evidence is scarce, the precise alignments of megalithic structures like Stonehenge and Newgrange suggest an advanced knowledge of astronomy, and perhaps a belief that certain geographical points held concentrated telluric energy. The idea that the Druids understood and harnessed these invisible lines of energy connecting sacred sites is a compelling, if unproven, theory. It's like they had a spiritual GPS, guiding them to the Earth's power hotspots. A common historical fact is that the Druids served multiple functions in Celtic society, acting as priests, judges, teachers, and healers. This multifaceted role is widely accepted due to consistent mentions in classical texts and inferences from later Celtic literature. However, historians still debate the precise power balance between the various Druidic functions and whether certain Druids specialized exclusively in one area, as solely bards or solely judges, or if all Druids were expected to master all aspects of their extensive knowledge. Was there a Druidic bar exam for each specialization, or was it a general certification? The details are fuzzy, lost to the oral tradition. The Druids also embraced the idea of ancestor veneration. Their forebears were not forgotten, but were seen as part of the continuous cycle of life, their spirits still present and influential. Offerings and rituals were performed to honor them, to seek their guidance, and to maintain a connection with the spiritual lineage of the tribe. This provided a deep sense of continuity and belonging, knowing that you were part of an unbroken chain stretching back into the mists of time and forward into eternity. It wasn't just family history, it was family spirit history. Consider the role of sacred sites like stone circles and ancient groves. While we know they were places of power and ritual for the Druids, what precisely happened there? Beyond the grand ceremonies, were there smaller daily rites performed by individual Druids? How were these sites chosen, and what specific energies or significances did they hold? Were they astronomical observatories, portals to the otherworld, or simply places of quiet contemplation? You stand at Stonehenge today and feel the immense presence, but the exact whispers of its purpose remain elusive. It's like standing in an ancient church, admiring the architecture, but never knowing the words of the sermons delivered there. Their cosmology was intrinsically linked to their role as prophets and seers. By understanding the divine patterns in nature, the movements of the stars, and the messages from the otherworld, they sought to interpret the will of the gods and foresee future events. This wasn't just about predicting the weather, it was about guiding tribal decisions, from agricultural planning to military strategy. Their perceived ability to tap into the cosmic consciousness gave them immense authority and influence over their people. It's like having access to a cosmic cheat code for life, only it involved a lot more ancient rituals and a lot less button mashing. The question of human sacrifice continues to haunt the Druidic legacy. While Roman accounts describe it, often with sensational detail, how common was it truly? Was it a regular practice, or reserved for dire circumstances? Perhaps as a last resort in times of famine or war, was it limited to criminals or prisoners of war? Or did it involve innocent victims, as the Romans claimed? The archaeological evidence for human sacrifice in Celtic contexts is sporadic and open to interpretation. This remains one of the most awful and debated secrets of their spiritual beliefs, making it difficult to fully reconcile the image of wise philosophers with alleged barbaric rites. It's the elephant in the ancient grove that no one can quite agree on. Ultimately, the Druidic worldview was one of interconnectedness. Everything was linked to the human realm to the divine, the living to the dead, the present to the past and future. There was no real separation, only different manifestations of the same underlying spiritual reality. Their rituals, their laws, their teachings, all were designed to ensure that humanity lived in harmony with this vast, pulsating cosmic web. It was a holistic vision, a profound understanding that humanity was not separate from nature, but an integral part of its grand, sacred design. An obscure detail that continues to puzzle scholars is the potential influence of Pythagorean philosophy on Druidic thought, particularly regarding the concept of metempsychosis transmigration of souls, or reincarnation. Caesar specifically noted that Druids taught that souls do not perish, but after death pass from one to another. While this could be an independent development, the precise philosophical connection, if any, remains an intriguing academic puzzle. Did some Greek philosopher take a wrong turn and end up teaching in a Celtic forest? Or was it a case of parallel intellectual evolution? The ancient world was more interconnected than we often imagine. As you float through these complex ideas, you realize that the Druids didn't just practice a religion, they lived a cosmology. Their beliefs were not abstract theories, but lived realities, shaping every aspect of their existence. They saw the universe as a living organism, vibrant with spirits and divine energies, and their role was to be its stewards, interpreters, and guardians. It's a worldview that, despite its ancient roots, carries echoes that resonate even today, reminding you of the enduring human quest to understand our place in the grand design of things. And as the mystical currents gently carry you towards the next chapter, you can't help but feel a profound sense of awe for the depth and complexity of their spiritual journey. The survival of Druidic elements within early Christian Ireland and Wales is another area of ongoing debate. Did the Druids truly disappear, or did their traditions simply merge with the new faith? There are tantalizing parallels between certain monastic practices and Druidic learning, or between the reverence for sacred wells and trees in Christian lore and pre-Christian Celtic practices. Some scholars argue for a seamless transition, while others maintain a more distinct break. It's like trying to find the faint outline of an old painting underneath a new one. Is it still there? Or just a trick of the light? You've explored the Druids' cosmic vision, their cyclical understanding of time, and their deep reverence for every living thing. Now, you stand at the precipice of another profound mystery. How did they manage to preserve such a vast and intricate body of knowledge, from laws and prophecies to medicine and astronomy, without ever committing it to writing? This is the realm of the sacred oral tradition, a testament to the power of human memory and a system of learning that would make your head spin with its sheer demands. Forget flashcards, these folks were hardcore. The very structure of the Druidic order, its hierarchy, its means of recruitment, the internal politics remains largely speculative. How did one become a Druid? Beyond the long training, was it hereditary? Or open to all? What was the career path for an aspiring Druid? Did they have councils? Or a supreme leader? Or was it a more decentralized network of independent wise individuals? We have a sense of their functions, but the operational manual for the Druidic organization is conspicuously missing. It's like understanding what a government does, but having no idea how the politicians are chosen or how they actually make decisions. Imagine a world where books don't exist, where scrolls are unknown, and where every single piece of vital information is carried not on parchment, but within the minds of a select few. That was the world of the Druids. Their wisdom, accumulated over centuries, was painstakingly memorized, recited, and passed down from teacher to student, generation after generation. It's like having the entire internet stored in your brain. But you have to recall it perfectly, in poetic verse, while standing in a cold, damp grove. No pressure. The language they spoke, the specific incantations they used, the melodies of their bards, these are largely lost to us. While we have reconstructed elements of Proto-Celtic and understand the later Celtic languages, the nuances of their sacred speech, the precise rhythms of their oral histories, and the music that accompanied their rituals are gone. You can imagine the powerful resonance of their chants echoing through the ancient trees, but you'll never truly hear them. It's a silence that speaks volumes about what history has claimed. This oral tradition wasn't simply about rote memorization. It was a sophisticated pedagogical system designed to ingrain knowledge deep within the psyche. Think about the way children learn nursery rhymes or songs. The rhythm, the repetition, the emotional resonance helps them stick. The Druids employed similar techniques, often couching their teachings in poetry, proverbs, and narrative epics. You can almost hear the rhythmic chanting, the sonorous voices of the teachers echoing through the moonlit forests, imparting complex legal precedents or the intricate properties of medicinal herbs through beautifully crafted verse. It made learning an immersive, almost hypnotic experience. The Druids, in many ways, represent the ultimate challenge to our modern, data-driven quest for definitive answers. They existed in a world largely unburdened by written records, where knowledge was embodied and spiritual connection was intuitive. Their mystery persists precisely because they operated outside the historical methodologies we now rely upon. They are a profound reminder that some truths are not meant to be written down, but experienced, passed on through breath and memory, and understood in the rustling of leaves or the silent turning of the stars. The process of becoming a Druid was arduous, demanding incredible dedication and mental discipline. You remember from earlier that a Druid could spend up to 20 years in training. That wasn't just a casual evening class, it was a lifetime commitment. During this time, students would commit vast quantities of knowledge to memory histories of their tribes, genealogies of their kings, the intricate laws that governed their society, the complex rituals of their faith, the properties of countless plants, the movements of celestial bodies, and the prophecies that guided their people. It was an intellectual marathon, a true test of endurance for the mind. You probably get tired just trying to remember your Wi-Fi password. As you consider their enigmatic legacy, you are left with a powerful sense of awe for a people who lived so deeply attuned to the natural and spiritual worlds. Their awful secrets are not just tales of human sacrifice or arcane magic. They are the secrets of a vanished way of life, a profound connection to the cosmos that we can only dimly perceive through the veil of time. They challenge us to look beyond the written word, to listen to the whispers of the earth, and to acknowledge that some of the deepest truths may forever remain just beyond our grasp. The Druids stand as a timeless testament to humanity's endless quest for meaning, reminding us that sometimes the greatest wisdom is found not in answers, but in the enduring power of the questions themselves. This refusal to write down their sacred knowledge wasn't an oversight, it was a deliberate choice, central to their power and the purity of their teachings. Firstly, it ensured exclusivity. Only those who underwent the rigorous training could access the full breadth of Druidic wisdom, solidifying their elite status within Celtic society. Secondly, it fostered discipline and commitment. If you had to memorize everything, you were much more invested in the learning process and the preservation of that knowledge. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, it was believed that writing diminished the sacred power of the spoken word. The spoken word was living, breathing, infused with spirit, direct communication from the divine. Writing, they may have thought, froze it, made it static, stripped it of its potency. It's like believing that whispering a secret holds more power than sending it in a text.